I've been exploring different facets of the surprisingly nebulous concept that is the ancestors. I shared some ideas on disconnection, lineage, and immortality in my recent look at Star Wars. In this video, I'll look at Ryan Coogler's excellent film, Sinners. Aside from being impressed by what an auteur filmmaker and his top-notch team were able to make, I also selfishly appreciate that this film provides me with a framework for structuring a set of ideas related to the ancestors. Beyond its entertainment value, this film delivers meaningful commentary and offers numerous takeaways. Its portrayal of the lived realities of Black Americans during the Jim Crow era is particularly moving. In this video, I'm sticking to topics relevant to the message of this channel. I am in no way limiting the film to these ideas. This is just one particular way of looking at it. Coogler himself may or may not have been purposeful about some of the ideas I'll raise, though I do think the unconscious speaks through all works in one way or another, and I hear it speaking through Sinners. The film presents what seems to be a stark contrast between two opposing forces, and both want Sammy to capitulate to their ways. There is Remic's group of vampires, whose goal is an everlasting bodily life on Earth. Stack encourages Sammy to follow this path. You also have Preacher Moore, Sammy's father, whose goal is to save Sammy's soul through institutional religion. Smoke urges Sammy to follow this path. While on the outside, Sammy's pastor father and Remic seem very different. In my view, they actually both speak to the value system of the status quo. In the status quo, we learn implicitly and explicitly that the people, objects, and situations in our lives must create for us a continuous state of comfort and happiness. That the unpleasant things in this world, discomfort and pain, must be avoided. We learn to crave pleasure and comfort nonstop. We become addicted to it. It's how we feel alive. The status quo creates metaphoric vampires. Many of us have become accustomed to squeezing the people, objects, and circumstances of our lives for whatever pleasure they can provide. C.G. Jung explored the idea of what he called the spirit of the times, the zeitgeist. It's basically what I call the status quo. In Sinners, this is represented in various ways, by the materialist striving of the twin brothers, the father's conservative church, and pie-in-the-sky progressiveness of the vampire cult. Jung contrasted this with the spirit of the depths, a hidden, primordial, otherworldly realm of knowledge, a realm that, if engaged with properly, can lead an individual through a process of alchemical transformation into another mode of being in the world. I had fully expected Sammy to give up his guitar to his father at the end of the film. This would indicate that he'd been saved, just like Smoke wanted. But that didn't happen. He held onto that guitar as if his soul depended on it, and his soul actually did depend on it. That guitar was what saved him from Remic. But I think what we see is an externalization, a very literal visual act on screen, representing how that guitar saves Sammy in a much deeper sense. It saves him from the vampiric life that is the status quo. As the epilogue scene played out, it all clicked for me. The guitar was Sammy's portal into the spirit of the depths. We get a glimpse into the spirit of the depths during a stunning sequence in which Sammy performs. He has a special ability to induce altered states in which he and others gain access to a liminal in-between realm, a place where those caught up in the spirit of the times can commune with the spirit of the depths. Annie tells us about this special ability. There are legends of people born with the gift of making music so true it can pierce the veil between life and death, conjuring spirits from the past and the future. She explains this practice is rooted in different pre-colonial traditions, including those of West Africa. According to recent research published by Manvir Singh, the practice of shamanism seems to be near universal among hunter-gatherer societies and non-industrial societies. While a lot has been made of the role of psychedelics in the indigenous practice of shamanism, singing and dancing are the most common methods of inducing altered states of consciousness. It's been often said that music dissolves boundaries, and its use in this traditional fashion creates a trance often referred to as ecstasy. Shamans from various cultures assert that they access state-specific knowledge and encounter beings in these ecstatic states. In other words, they can access what is not normally accessible in the routine experience of everyday life. The use of ecstatic states isn't limited to hunter-gatherers. There are some who convincingly argue that what we call Western culture has its roots in these sorts of ecstatic states. It is said that the ancient Pythagoreans taught that the entire cosmos can be understood as a form of esoteric music. It is less well known that this teaching of the music of the spheres was just one part of a broader body of esoteric knowledge that was learned through altered states of consciousness, induced via ecstatic practices. And interestingly, there may be a musical correspondence between the structure of African American blues and the Pythagorean model of the cosmos. Quote, "In a way you can imagine that for the Pythagoreans, the cosmos is constantly playing the blues." Sammy's debut performance at the Juke allows us to see another realm. As Sammy performs, we see the ancestors, past and future, all dancing along. This sequence gets a lot of acclaim, and rightly so. This scene is a great representation of what Mircea Eliade, a scholar fascinated by shamanism and traditional medicine work, called a hierophany, a quote, breakthrough of the sacred into the profane. And technically, according to the criteria used by Manvir Singh, Sammy is very much practicing something quite akin to shamanism. Sammy's ability shows us that there's something else going on in this experience we call life. Life is not limited to the status quo. It's not about fundamentalist religiosity, where you can achieve eternal salvation in heaven if you play by a dominator's rules. And it's not limited to a falsely saccharine materialist vision of creating a permanent heaven on earth, where the goal is no death through the indefinite extension of bodily life. Sammy shows us the possibility of living within something that Terence McKenna called an ecology of souls. Terence McKenna is probably known primarily as an advocate for the use of psychedelics, and for his descriptive encounters with beings during DMT sessions. But one thing I don't hear enough about is that McKenna in talks and interviews often said that he, somewhat reluctantly, was coming to terms with the idea that these entities were the dead, they were the ancestors. You ask a shaman what these things are, they don't hesitate, they say, these are the ancestor spirits. Well, it takes a while for the implications of this to sink in. They're talking about dead people. This actually is one level of a cosmic system where birth and death are transitions from level to level. I think it's the most intellectually challenging position to take via Western thinking, to claim that we have to reopen the question of life after death in a serious way. This explanation, which is my current favorite, it is a little disturbing. The reason the DMT space feels so familiar, peculiar, and excruciatingly familiar is because these things in another place represent an ecology of souls. This is the realm of the dead. I find myself once more drawn into esoteric ideas that point to the notion of sacred agriculture. This phrase, ecology of souls, is to me incredibly evocative. It is descriptive and still nebulous enough to maintain a necessary air of mystery and awe. The ecology of souls describes what we call human consciousness, the experience of being human as part of a vast ecosystem of soul. All beings in existence are cultivated in a garden-like spiritual terrain, interconnected, interdependent, diverse, incorporating what we call life and death, and oriented toward a balanced whole. What I like about the portrayal of the ancestors in Sinners is not just that they're deceased beings that used to be human, like when Smoke is welcomed by Annie and their daughter into the afterlife, but the ancestors are also beings that haven't been born yet. They dance together in a timeless realm, and from there, the ancestors act as divine intermediaries and influence the living. Ancestor veneration has been a traditional spiritual practice in various African cultures for millennia and is still actively practiced. Author Fanny Brewster writes, "For a long time, Africanist people's belief in spirits was criticized and demeaned among non-Africans. More recently, there is a recognition of the value. It is no longer considered heathen or backward to acknowledge the spirit world. African Americans have always recognized the importance of remembering the spirit world. They have always felt the necessity of keeping their conscious lives in connection with their unconscious states, ancestors being a part of that state." Stephen Karcher, a researcher and practitioner steeped in both African and ancient Chinese shamanistic practices, described how traditional cultures in Africa and in China are enormously concerned with the ancestors and see no more important thing than connecting with them. So it's quite appropriate that in Sinners we connect with ancestors from both of these cultures. The way I see it, most of us in the status quo, like these vampires, have gotten stuck in one mode, the earthly mode, and we operate cut off from the realm of the ancestors. It's like we've denied and cut off half of what reality is all about. Instead of seeing and engaging with the realm of the ancestors, we see death as a dark, endless chasm, a void, and we are afraid of what the future might bring. But we feel the absence of something. There is something we miss deep down. In the epilogue scene, Stack embodies the spirit of the times in a humorous 90s fashion, but it only takes one question from Sammy for us to see that underneath his cool exterior, Stack feels the absence of something. Stack opens up, he misses his brother and the warmth of the sun. Despite having money, power, and eternal life on Earth, there are deeply meaningful and important things he cannot have. He has lost what makes him human. Sammy has lived a long life, a life lived entering ecstatic states. He's on Earth, but routinely taps into the realm of the ancestors. It isn't explicitly stated in the film that Sammy understands he has the ability to do this, but Remick definitely understood and wanted to have that power for himself. Like Stack, Remick missed his dead. Stack offers Sammy the opportunity to join the vampires in earthly immortality, and Sammy's reply seems to indicate that he understands that Earth isn't the only place. There is something else. Sammy has been surrounded by the souls of the timeless ancestors all his life. The ancestors exist concurrently to us, not only those we consider to be from the past, but also those we consider to be coming in the future. We think the ancestors are behind us. They are actually in front of us. We go back to connect with them in order that we might imagine a future. They are our future. They are the only way we will have a future. This is living as an ecology of souls. This is the third way, the liminal way, between the material and the spiritual, between the spirit of the times and the spirit of the depths. Some Islamic Sufi sages spoke of the barzakh, a liminal state that can be accessed through spiritual practices of chanting, heartfelt music, and dance. Benny Shannon, a researcher into the psychedelic ayahuasca brew, recounted how traditional medicine workers told him that it wasn't the plant medicine that healed necessarily, but rather that it is, quote, he who sings, who heals. Shannon pointed out that the words cantando and encanto in Spanish, and chant and enchantment in English share a common root, suggesting the use of the human voice is a magical act, an act that can bring about healing. McKenna's speculation on resonance sheds some light on how this might work. Resonance is a principle of magic at a distance. You can play an open note on a cello, and a piano 50 feet across the room will sound in the same octave. So we know resonance exists as a musical phenomenon, but what we need to realize is that resonance is built into time. A given moment of time is a sort of hologrammatic interference pattern of past times. I consider those past times to be in resonance. According to McKenna, if this doesn't click with you, if you outright dismiss this out of hand without proper exploration, it is likely that the cultural programming, the indoctrination of the status quo, runs deep within your psyche. Cultures create our mental confinement in time. A shaman is a human mind capable of traveling in time. At the end of the film, Sammy thinks back fondly about everything that happened before the vampire chaos began. Singh tells of his surprising experience at a traditional healing ritual. It will go from a healing ceremony into a celebration. I had this impression or intuition that healing is something somber and solemn, and there is some of that, but it's also very celebratory. A lot of people coming together, feasting together, the shamans are dancing, they are healing in a way that's very theatrical, other people are entering trance, and then it's a party. Everyone is staying up all night, other people are dancing and laughing, and then it's 6 a.m. McKenna, speaking at a rave of course, described his idea of the archaic revival as being related to the practice of shamanism, ecstasy, and orgiastic sexuality. As Sammy and Stack reflect on how special that evening was, we see flashbacks of the community working together, and very importantly, we see Annie overseeing the cooking. It is notable that Annie, who is a traditional medicine woman, is brought to the juke to cook. The role of the medicine woman has been degraded and trampled for centuries. Countless women healers written out of history, or accused of witchcraft or outright murdered. I think our image of the cackling witch looming over her boiling cauldron is a remnant of this. But this cauldron is more than what meets the eye. The cauldron is an ancient image of alchemical transformation. It plays an important role in the ancient ways. Smoke's character arc starts off with him as a worldly, materialist skeptic, not fully believing in magic, to seeing Annie's spiritual knowledge on display, and eventually ends with him following her instructions as he enters the realm of the ancestors. Since ancient times to this very day, Chinese religious traditions use the cauldron as a foundational image of spiritual transformation. In ancient times, the cauldron was explicitly used to cook a sacred meal for the ancestors. In present day, families all over China present food and drink to the deceased. Recently, someone I know personally kept having recurring dreams about their deceased spouse. The dreams were distressing, and it was understood that this was a cry for care. Without hesitation, the entire family scheduled a visit to the cemetery in order to sweep the tomb and provide offerings of food and drink to the dead. Within Taoist traditions, the cauldron continues to be a powerful symbol of alchemical transformation. In the Dao de Ching, the cauldron refers to itself as an image of the true ancestor, and the ancient i-Ching oracle system refers to itself as the Ding, the great cauldron, a vessel of spirits. Karcher described the sacred meal cooked in this cauldron as a joining of the two worlds. I think this is all related to ideas such as sacred fire in many cultures, and I often think about Christian mystic Meister Eckhart and his concept of the sacred boiling of the divine, which results in creation. While this is all a bit heady, we can bring it back down to day-to-day life by considering our own physical relationship to food. I think it can be argued that we all carry our own sacred cauldron within our bodies, yet don't understand it as such. Our stomachs can be understood as an alchemical cauldron of sorts, where lifeless dead material is transformed in various ways, most strikingly, back into a living being. These dead materials are converted into a body which you can use to sing, dance, and to make love. It's probably good to reflect on how we use and misuse this cauldron within our bodies. Hindu guru Neem Karoli Baba said, "God comes in the form of food to the hungry." Some scholars consider Jesus of Nazareth to be a shaman of sorts, an indigenous healer, a medicine man. Many traditions that honor him to this day have practitioners who ritually commune with God via the sacrament of Holy Communion, a sacrament in which the practitioner physically ingests God, receiving the divine into one's body and allowing the practitioner to enter the broader spiritual body shared by all Christians. For many, the Eucharist is food for the soul. Jungian Fanny Brewster credits Ryan Coogler in his telling of black stories on screen. In old Hollywood, black bodies are used to carry packages on the head on safari or something. It was really important to move away from 19th century narratives that were not narratives of black people. In Sinners, I think we have a supernatural tale steeped in the culture of the African diaspora, and it can help us understand what it really means to have a soul, and what it means to have lost one's connection to the ecology of souls. The terms soul food, soul music, soul brothers and sisters are all intimately and inextricably related to the African American community, and also point us to what has been cut out of the status quo. The vampires in the film sing and perform well. They talk all about unity, love, and progressing together. But in actuality, they've lost their connection to the ecology of souls. They are performative and shallow. This, to me, is the real death. Author Peter Kingsley often discussed this topic, noting wryly that the dead are not dead, they are more alive than we are. Soul sickness or soul loss serve as modern catch-all terms for ailments that shamans and traditional healers refer to as a fragmented soul, a missing soul, or when describing an individual who has been severed from proper communion with the spirit world, like the vampires and sinners. Shamans of many cultures practice soul retrieval, a ritual in which they go into an altered state in order to find and retrieve a soul, healing the individual by reconnecting it in proper alignment with the ecology of souls. I think that is what is needed in our culture now. It's not hard to look around and conclude that we are losing our connection to soul and becoming increasingly deluded by the machinations of the spirit of the times. We now have technologies that act as false elders and ancestors, regurgitating information at us as if it was wisdom. The corporate hive mind has taken over ecstatic festivals, It creates images and voices that purport to be disembodied beings. It creates electronic simulations of dead loved ones. Now, broadly speaking, this isn't new. There's always been a clash between ecstatic wisdom and traditional medicine versus centralized authority structures. But in our era, I think the powers of the status quo have co-opted the ecstatic beyond what has come before, commoditizing the ecstatic, telling you what these experiences are, and telling you what to expect to get from them. People are doing their best to turn techniques of ecstasy into a mechanical, soulless process, akin to placing an order at a fast food drive-thru. As clever as he was, I think McKenna was naively wrong in thinking that psychedelics and the internet would turn what he called the dominator culture inside out. He thought that the internet, in combination with legalized psychedelics, would bring about a mass revelation of truth. But from what I can see, what's happened is that both have played quite well into the mass delusions of the status quo. The way I see it, the metaphorical vampires running the status quo have lost access to the realm of the ancestors, so instead of communing with them, instead of partaking in the sacred meal, they ingest the life and vibrancy of others. The algorithms don't create anything from the depths of soul. They ingest, rearrange, and spit back out what we're addicted to seeing and hearing, like the glib platitudes we hear from the vampires and sinners. I think the root of all of this is our learned societal fear of death. We fear it so much that we'll do anything to avoid really looking at it. We become addicted and lost in the spectacle that is this world, and never get a glimpse of who might be there right behind the veil. Spiritual teacher Eckhart Tolle points out that in rainforests there is a commingling of life and death, in such a way that one cannot be separated from the other. But as human beings, we do our best to keep them as separate as possible. In many indigenous and traditional cultures that continue the ancient ways, there is often a fear of ghosts and malicious spirits, and a fear that the ancestors may get angry and cause the living trouble. I view that as sort of a misalignment between realms. Those in the other realm become unhappy when devalued, forgotten, and discarded. Of course, things get ugly when we're in the process of losing touch with our soul. Brewster notes that in some traditional African cultures, ancestors are believed to cause sickness as well as health. Ancestors form an unbreakable linkage with the living. In this way, they offer a connection to the unconscious. When individuals do not give proper respect to ancestors, then sickness occurs. I think it's only natural that the dead will try and get our attention in some way or another. This is all perfectly in keeping with C.G. Jung's Liber Novus, which served as a journal for some of his experiences in the liminal realm. If we ignore the power of the spirit of the depths, we do so at our own peril. The dead don't go away. The more we ignore them, the louder they get. Sinners captures how figures like Sammy and Annie foster the ancient ways in the Mississippi Delta despite the oppression they live under, a dynamic that resonates with Manvir Singh's findings. When authorities try to destroy shamanism, it reemerges quickly, or it's pretty resilient. Delta Slim gives us a glimpse into this resilience in a masterful scene. Slim tells a harrowing story about his friend who was lynched and dismembered by racists. Slim's lament and pain seamlessly transitions into a cry from the depths, into the blues, the kind of music that even their vicious oppressors can't help but be moved by. If this isn't alchemy, I don't know what is. We simply cannot live outside of the ecology of souls, and I think that McKenna is right when he notes that human history is completely interpenetrated by the peculiar, the non-human, that which has intentionality and affection for mankind, for humanity, and this is what shamans call to their aid. This is how the curing is done. It is done through these spirit helpers. So far as I know, Jungianism is the only modern intellectual position where you can even raise this issue without having a net dropped over you. This is absolutely forbidden by the modern worldview. Jungian Marie-Louise von Franz shared two anecdotes that are relevant. The first was that of a patient of Jung who had a puzzling dream the night that he died. The patient had gone to bed not knowing Jung had passed away, and the dream seemed to say that death is a problem of a threshold of perception between the living and the dead. The latter have disappeared behind an event horizon, as it were, like stars in a black hole, but they are still in existence. Von Franz also tells of an African Zulu woman who explained this dynamic by holding out her hand, first with her palm turned upward saying, "That's how we live." She then turned her hand over with the palm downward and said, "That's how the ancestors live." For von Franz, this could not express more clearly the idea that the worlds of the living and the dead together form a whole. Jungian Fanny Brewster reminds us that while we have an imperative to deepen and expand on Jung's work and renew it in our era, we cannot forget that Jung could only go so far himself. In his autobiography, he references African people, and Jung on his trip to Africa used a whip in one of the dances he did. He got afraid how it was going to make him go black. He used the whip to break people up at the end of the dance. He felt everyone was dancing and getting so excited, and it was unnerving for him. Jung wouldn't let himself get anywhere near the state of unbridled ecstasy initiated by Sammy at the Juke. Nevertheless, Jung, in his stiff turn-of-the-century Swiss-German way, opened up a clearing, a path, for those of us caught in the status quo of our Western mindset, to establish our own personal correspondence with the depths, to look within for what we've disinherited. Jungian James Hillman lamented, "We have this tremendous wall between living and death, no sense of the permeability of life and death, the flow of the others, the voices, the figures of the powers, into our lives every day, of our relations to those in the other who in the old days used to say, 'Welcome,' when you die." We might need to ask ourselves a question that Hillman asked: who are the dead? And what is it in America, in our culture, that has so much trouble with the dead? Stefan Ulich notes that, for Jung, our most important task is to develop a relationship to our own dead ancestors. These could be family members, or to those we have an affinity, but the dead require something of the living, and that is something we should all take seriously. No one can tell us what that something is. We each need to find out what is being asked of us. Karcher explains that one can feel the return of the ancestors. It's often subtle, and in one's own body. The issue is to acquaint ourselves with the state after death while still in life. And through this practice, one's egoic sense of I recenters itself between the two realms. When we reach this point, we fear death no longer. So many people are obsessed with the idea of resurrection after death, totally oblivious to the fact that we human beings are the resurrected dead. Science cannot deny that as human beings, we are literally formed by consuming death, both materially through these flesh bodies and intellectually through inherited knowledge. Stephen Karcher is blunt about it. We carry the dead around us. Our bodies are formed from the dead. Our beings are formed from the dead. We can't be in this world without having the dead in our bodies. We see them in our dreams at night. What we know as life in the status quo is a hollow shell game. True life involves engaging with the ecology of souls, communing with our dead, understanding we're all in one big divine cauldron of creative transformation. We and the ancestors are one. We've come to the end of this somewhat eccentric video essay. I'll leave you with a response I recently received from the i-Ching. Connect with something larger than your personal desires. Keep to this path, for the ancestors bless you. Learn to respect them, for it is their presence that opens the way.